Here comes Doug.
Yeah. Hi, Doug.
Hi,
Hey
So,
again.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Sorry, I was having trouble retrieving the Zoom link.
Yeah,
very-
yep,
A pile of emails.
yeah, right.
Thorns draws inspiration from horror classics like Hellraiser, The Thing, and The Exorcist. How did you balance paying homage to these iconic films while still creating a unique and original story?
Wonderful question. It's a challenge certainly to pay homage to any of your favorite classics from from the 70s and 80s, and that's where Thorns derives a lot of its inspiration from, all the great classic monster movies. And the idea was to specifically make a monster film that was heavy in practical effects, and I think we achieved, and hopefully audiences will agree.
Doug, to begin, I am a huge fan of your work. You have played roles in various horror subgenres. What do you think particularly compelling about religion's horror, and how does it differ from other types of horror you have been part of?
I'm sorry. Can I ask you to repeat the question?
Okay, sorry, I Doug. You have played roles in various horror subgenres. What do you think particularly compelling about religious horror, and how does it differ from the other types of horror you have been part of?
So you're asking about specifically about religious horror.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And I think it's generally an interesting question for people working in horror these days, because religion has always been a part of horror, inevitably. I mean, horror, the building blocks of horror are life, death, resurrection, flesh, blood, the spirit, souls, etc., salvation, damnation, evil, good. All of this is the landscape of horror, whether or not religion is involved, and of course, all of that is the landscape of religion as well. I think it's a challenge for somebody like me, who isn't a believer. I just played, followed up playing an archbishop by playing an exorcist in a movie called The Exorcists. Now, I don't believe in the devil, and I don't believe in demonic possession. But it's an awful lot of fun. It's it's a good sandpit to be let loose to play in, with all that stuff. And how much it differs, I'm not really quite sure, but it certainly Thorns, taking its inspiration in a lot of ways, from the ideas and the language and the apocalyptic imagery of the Book of Revelation, and with the Archbishop involved, and with this idea that that somehow the church should be involved in issues relating to space exploration, because it's as much the world of the church as it is of science. Certainly was an intriguing element for me in Thorns, and I think Doug's done a great job in the screenplay of pulling the two elements together.
The film features a mysterious radio signal from deep space that triggers the biblical end of times. How did you approach blending scientific concept with religion themes to create a cohesive and engaging narrative for the director?
Could you repeat that again?
Sorry, the film features a mysterious radio signal from the deep space that triggers the biblical end of times. How did you approach blending scientific concepts with religion themes to create a cohesive and engaging narrative?
Wow. Well, hopefully we succeed and audiences feel, that we succeed. The early word is that it does succeed. So, the idea of melding science and religion has always been a fascinating topic or topics for exploration. And if I'm reading your question correctly, I think the basis for the film was a horror story, and the idea of these religious elements, being explored in sort of a scientific way, I thought was intriguing and fascinating. We've had a lot of earthen biblical films and biblical stories, and as we begin to explore the cosmos more, I'm fascinated by how, the diocese and, in other religions, not just the Catholic religion, will make that leap to incorporate elements of science and outer space into their, faith. So, hopefully I touched on your question to some degree. So yeah.
The character for Archbishop Jenkins seems to be morally complex. Doug, can you delve deeper into this motivation and the internal conflicts he faced throughout the story?
Actually, no. He's very ambiguously presented, deliberately, I assume, which I liked and attracted me to the character. And as I've already said, the idea that as an archbishop of the church, which certainly at the beginning of the film, he's straightforwardly presented as an archbishop of the Catholic Church who has been brought in by the space agency to deal with this, or to be an advisor, at least in terms of this rogue space station that is sending these strange signals with untoward, unfortunate consequences. And it's not apparent in the film. It was not apparent to me in the script. I think it's partly because we really never see Archbishop Jenkins outside of this frame.
Yes. So
we don't see him standing up. Although we know he's in a confessional box later on, we don't see him in a location. We don't know where he's operating from. We don't know who he is. We don't know if he's attached to a church. We don't know if he's working out of the Vatican, or is he somewhere in the United States, or is he somewhere in England, or is he in Rome, or where is he? Or is he not in any of these places? Is he only pretending to be an archbishop? All of these things are possible answers, valid questions to which we don't know the answers. And in terms of the script, I was asking myself the same questions, and the answers weren't there. So therefore the answer is leave it ambiguous, and in some ways it's not so different to where I was with Pinhead, who didn't have a name. So I didn't even have that benefit of playing the character. Nothing I don't know what a Cenobite is. There's nowhere I can read about what Cenobites do. At least I have some experience, you know, directly or indirectly, of archbishops and of ministers and priests and so forth in the church, and none of that applies in the case of approaching playing a Cenobite. You have nothing but you and the script and your imagination to work on, and I think part of the strength of the character in Hellraiser is, you know, he does a lot of telling you who he is, who the Cenobites are. We're angels to some, demons to other. We're, you know, explorers in the further regions of with this, with that, with that. None of which tells you anything. In fact, nothing. And so you end the film with the Cenobites being as mysterious as they were when you first meet them. And I think Doug's achieved that in Thorns as well. So I think audiences must have those questions in their heads as the film is going along. Who the fuck is this guy? Is he really an archbishop? Is he, you know, what's going on here? And at the end of the movie, you'll still have those questions in your head and you won't have any answers. I like that.
For the director, practical effects and makeup play a significant role in Thorns. Could you share some memorable moments or challenges from the set related to creating these practical effects?
Oh, sure. With the practical effects, I worked with a gentleman by the name of Dan Phillips and his team, and we had to bring the actor Bo Schumacher, who does a wonderful job playing the creature in this film. And Bo was tasked with being under heavy prosthetic makeup. And in this case, our creature, the Necronaut, we so lovingly refer to him as, he has no visibility in the makeup once he's immersed in it. And breathing is actually achieved through two slits, two very small slits in the makeup mask. So the actor needed to be led by hand to and from the makeup chair to location, and at all times, you know, was grappling with disorientation and this claustrophobic feeling that was very overwhelming in the full makeup. Now, to the actor Bo Schumacher's credits, he's a licensed scuba diver, and there is a similarity that he compared being in the makeup to, in, you know, the sense of being claustrophobic and not really having your breathing is controlled and whatnot. So whenever we brought the actor to set, no matter what we were doing, we had to shift gears and immediately focus on filming with the actor in the monster makeup, because it was such a delicate balance for the actor and such a challenge for him. But like a trooper, you know, he made it through, and, you know, in instances wearing that makeup for 8 hours, 10 hours. It's just, it can be.
I wanted to ask Doug, actually, because I don't know the answer to this myself. I mean, was this, as it were, a mask that he could lift off in one piece, or was it like I had, separate pieces applied and glued in place?
Yes, it was, it was completely constructed. It wasn't a mask.
Right.
And once it was on, there was, partially because of budget limitations, you know, so it was very difficult for the actor. And I can't thank, Bo enough for never once saying, I was waiting for him at one point to have to pull the makeup off. because it was so confining, but he did it, and it was
He did a great job. He's part of the union.
yeah, for sure.
Doug, you have been a part of the Hellraiser franchise for years. How did you involve with the series influence your perspective on horror cinema and storytelling, particularly on this movie?
Can you repeat the second half? I got that I've been involved in the Hellraiser franchise for many years.
How did your involvement in these movies influence your perspective on horror cinema and storytelling, particularly on this movie Thorns?
I don't know that Hellraiser did either of those things necessarily, to be honest. I mean, as I've said many times, I was a fan of horror films before I knew I wanted to be an actor. When I did become an actor, it wasn't necessarily with any expectation or ambition to be working in the genre. But because I'm also a lover of literature and fiction, it's story. It's always the story. And that's true in horror movies, science fiction movies, thrillers, love stories, comedies, anything. There are exceptions to that for obvious reasons, but we don't need to go into that. But it's always the narrative, the story, and so that's always what I'm looking for. When I'm asked to look at a script, there's just always two questions in my head initially. Is the story interesting? Do I want to turn the page to, find out what happens next? Would I go and see this film? And is the character interesting? Does the character grab me, and in the character in relation to the narrative and so forth? So it's always those two things, I think, and Doug achieves that, or did, to my satisfaction, when I read the screenplay of Thorns. Ticked both boxes. I was grabbed by the story and intrigued by our enigmatic archbishop.
For the director, the film's atmosphere seems to harken back to the 80s horror aesthetic. How did you recreate this nostalgic feeling with still maintaining a contemporary and relevant storyline?
A great question, because what's interesting is when I like to describe the film, I refer to it as a modern day monster movie with a distinct retro vibe. So I looked at the time, almost the the eternally the interest in religion and science, and I thought that the subject matter itself of what our story was about was contemporary and interesting, and so that allowed me then to step into the homage, and specifically the art direction and production design, which are areas that I really love in film. That's where we had a lot of fun, working with two art directors to give this almost feel of when we step inside the mountaintop observatory. I wanted you to step back into the late 70s, early 80s. That was what the discussions were. So the lighting, the set dressings, and even to a point, the lenses we were using and working with were all meant to sort of hearken to the the retro aspect of the story. But it had to sound like a modern film, and the horror scenes themselves have to deliver like modern horror requirements. So you're dealing with, you know, retro practical effects, but you need to deliver in a very modern way. So hopefully the balance is there, and people like that.
Doug, as an actor, author, and narrator, you are working on a variety of projects. Could you share your process of transitioning between different mediums and genres?
Well, I mean, you're very kind to call me a writer. I'm not really. I'm an actor who. Well, I'm an actor who wrote a book.
Yeah.
I think there's a sharp distinction to be made between that and being a writer. And I've never directed, so I have to pass on that question. Really, I think. Yeah.
Thorns takes themes of faith and belief, particularly through the experienced protagonist. How did you approach exploring these themes in the context of an horror narrative?
Who is that directed to?
For you, Douglas, you.
Okay, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. Thorns tackle themes of faith and belief, particularly through the experienced protagonist. How did you approach exploring these themes in the context of an horror narrative?
Well, I think the character of an ex-priest really sets, you know, you up for horrific content, if you will. You know, a man of troubled spiritual beliefs is sort of an ideal character, right, to throw into the middle of an apocalyptic tale, if you will. So I think the idea began as telling an apocalyptic tale, and the origins of the whole idea of the evil, and actually stem from a book I'd read years ago, The Hope for Healing Human Evil. But once the foundation of the story was there, that we were going to explore a signal per se, and that someone had to go investigating. I was tickled by the idea that this character could have been a former priest, because who is now working for a space agency, sort of as if the character had been looking for answers on Earth and unable to find them on Earth. So he was now turning his sights to the cosmos in hopes to get those answers, when, all along, I think the answers that were inside him, and that's metaphorically speaking, for what's to come in the story. So hopefully that touches on your question.
Yeah. The title Thorns underwent a change from its original title Necronaut. Can you elaborate on this decision behind the change, and how the new title better represents the film's content and themes? About the change of the title. I think so. I have read somewhere that the first title was Necronaut. After you have taken this new title, Thorns. Do you think this is a better choice, and why?
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yes, I think that it's a perfect title for the film, although I do like our previous title for the film as well. I think the title speaks to you, and it sort of spoke to me as we developed the character of the monster, and as I saw the monster as being again, a metaphor for what's inside all of us. I thought the title of the film should mirror, aspects of that. So I sort of thought it was more appropriate in a way to call the film Thorns. Yeah.
Religious horror often delves into deeper philosophical and existential questions. In what ways Thorn explores them, these themes, and how do you contribute to the overall horror experience?
Is that for me?
Yes, if you want, or for the director.
Um, so is the question how do the specific themes in Thorns relate to horror
Yes.
in general?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Well, I mean, Thorns is clearly, you know, that we tend to kind of put things down into little boxes of the kind of horror film, or you know, we subdivide cinema into genres, and then we subdivide the genres into subgenres. And I guess Thorns, in my head, having read the script and said yes to it, you know, it's an apocalypse movie. It's a retelling of the story of the apocalypse, in to an extent. Within that, it has explores a lot of ideas, specifically about evil, and specifically of the, as Archbishop Jenkins says, that, you know, well, what did you think? And he says that it's the oldest trick played on humanity to make us believe that hell is a thing, is a place, and it's over there, down there somewhere, when it isn't. It's in all our heads, and it's right here, right now. I think in some ways all of horror deals with this. You know, the basic building blocks of horror: life, death, blood, resurrection, evil, damnation, salvation, murder, destruction, etc. This is all the human condition, and they're all the building blocks of horror, of religion as well. All religions are concerned with these same ideas: life and death and damnation, salvation, obviously. But religion is also heavily engaged with the ideas of the body and the flesh, and sexuality, and the actuality of the body, whether to embrace it, or, as a lot of religions do, to reject and, you know, attempt to distance and control these things that ultimately will not be distanced or controlled.
Thorn is premiering at Fright Fest. How do you feel about the film's debut and to potential reception among dedicated horror enthusiasts? What do you feel about the premiere at Fright Fest of this movie?
Oh, well, of course, I'm honored that we were invited to screen our film in London. We decided to make it our world premiere because of the history of the festival, and other such wonderful films, you know, that have premiered there. So we're extremely honored and humbled by the invitation, and we're looking forward to representing the film there, and getting a chance to see London for the first time as well.
Doug, you have created a YouTube channel where you read books and poems aloud. What inspired you to start this channel, and how do you select the material you read?
It really started during lockdown, and actually part of the inspiration came from Patrick Stewart, who started reading all of Shakespeare's sonnets, a sonnet a day, in a very informal kind of way, just him in a book reading. And It's something I've always done. I read from an early age, and as soon as I could read, I read aloud, and I still do. I guess that's part of an actorly impulse. So I decided to do something similar, and started by with a kind of serialization of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Was the first thing that I did, and I wanted to do it in the same kind of relaxed way. I do it out of the art, that chair right behind me there. So I'm just sitting in an armchair with the book in my hand, and none of it is edited. It's all live. So if I make a mistake, I make a mistake, and we move on. But it was the desire to just have that feeling that it's me reading you a story. And I've got very lax recently about keeping up with it, which I keep chastising myself about and rapping myself over the knuckles, and I do intend to do more. I have a long list of stuff I want to do, and I really ought to start doing it. The second part of your question, I read what I like.
Nice. And my last question, can you tell us some words, about your upcoming projects for you, Douglas, and for you, Doug?
Well, as I said, since doing Thorns, I did voiceover for an animated series called The Invincibles, which I think is on Amazon at the beginning of the year. Actually, I possibly shouldn't be talking about that, because that was a SAG project. And then subsequently, I played a priest in a movie called The Exorcists for Asylum, and next month I'm going to be doing an independent movie, shooting in Ohio. The movie is called Thy Will Be Done. I'm playing a police captain.
Nice.
Getting out of the church.
And you, Douglas?
Yeah, obviously the number of projects for a filmmaker, you know, well, I suppose these days you can crank movies out, you know, on your phone, right? If you want, doesn't mean they'll be any good, but yeah, I'm developing a new project, and you know, again, I do have a sort of a sequel idea to Thorns, you know, that has been around, and we're going to wait to see how well Thorns is received. And beyond that, you know, I have something that kind of falls more into the lines of a bio horror film, wanting to explore other subject matter and whatnot. So, but you know, on average, it's usually a few years between projects, which is the nature of, you know, the way you know, funding comes together and things like that. So yeah.
Thank you, Douglas. Have a good day. Thank you, good Doug. Have a good day too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a great day.
Take care.